How's it going, everybody? Andy McCullough from the Los Angeles Times here with Dylan Hernandez, also of the Los Angeles Times. Dylan, they did it. For the first time since 1988, the Los Angeles Dodgers are going to the World Series. What do you have to say for yourself?
It's weird, man. It's kind of like I've just associated this franchise with losing and disappointment. You know, the last time I went to the World Series, I was 8 years old in Mrs. Hawkins' fourth grade class. Bill Plaschke was only like 70 years old. And here we are. They're going to the World Series. And, I'm really happy for actually the city, Not too long ago, I had some guy had to come in to fix my cable. And he was telling me, like, really sad, right? I think he was 28 or something. So he had never seen a World Series. Not only had he never seen a World Series, his kid had never seen a World Series.
Right.
This had become multi-generational now. So I think it's going to be kind of great for the city. I'm guessing we could be headed for disappointment, perhaps. Crushing disappointment.
It's a coin flip at this point. They'll either win the World Series or they won't. But I think, this team did move the needle forward at the very least. It's, you have to call it a success. I mean, obviously they'll be very disappointed if they lose, but to go almost 3 decades when you have the sort of payroll and stature and, just sort of organizational might that the Dodgers have had over these past 30 years.
Especially under Frank McCourt.
Talk
about organizational might.
Well, tell me about how this team, I guess, has changed in the last few years since those eras. You were there, you lived it.
This is the first time, really, because even like with the O'Malley's, eventually they got to a position, right, where they did have to sell the franchise. Fox comes in, they did not care. They bought it because they just wanted the TV rights. It gets taken over by McCourt, and I think that the reason Major League Baseball chose them was specifically because they didn't have money. They did not want the Dodgers to do what they're doing right now, which is to pay a lot for players and force everybody else to pay more. And, so it's been kind of this like frustrating thing where, you have, especially, when you compare it to what was going on with the Lakers. You had, it feels like
Shaq,
a championship.
Kobe,
Kobe, they're winning every single year.
Short of a championship is a failure.
Yeah, and like you look at the potential of the market, and you're thinking, you know what, they draw 50,000 no matter what. Like, why can't this franchise win?
Right.
And Guggenheim, to their credit, yes, they completely botched the TV thing to like an unrecognizable form.
Right.
But that
like you
said,
can't watch them on TV.
Yeah, that said, you know what, this is kind of the deal that. Now, not that fans really had a choice, but this is kind of the deal with the devil, so to speak, where, it's a terrible TV contract, but it's paying now for, to Guggenheim's credit, they have invested this into the team. They started doing it when they went out and got Hanley Ramirez and Adrian Gonzalez, and they signed Andre Ethier to a long extension right away because they wanted to show the fans we're committed now.
Right.
And, now it's not just the financial might, but to kind of bring in a guy like Andrew Friedman. And to be honest, I still to some degree, I'm a little bit skeptical. But hey, look, this is all, what I thought was smoke and mirrors, I guess it works.
So, okay, on that, what did you think was smoke and mirrors that you think that maybe they have shown is a little more real than that? Like, is it just the way they use pitching? Is it the lineups? What exactly?
Yeah, I guess the bullpen thing, because I think I saw, because I was still on the beat their first season. Right. And the bullpen, they kind of put it together the way they did right now, right? They could have gone out and get Andrew Miller. Right. They did not. They tried to kind of piece it together the way they have since. And you know what? That year the bullpen was bad.
Right.
So I'm kind of thinking, you know what? I'm not so, because then you start questioning everything that they're saying, right? This whole idea of, building for the future while trying to contend now. You started thinking there was maybe a little bit of lip service, and that maybe they're really trying to build for later while kind of doing this halfway. And I think that feeling was even in the clubhouse a little bit.
Sure.
Some players
when they didn't get Cole Hamels.
Yeah.
When I guess you could argue when they didn't get Chris Sale this winter or something. But that obviously started to, like, you can see sort of a continuum of trades. Like in 15, the big move they made was that weird deal that got them Alex Wood, Jim Johnson, Louis Avalon, at Latos, as we all know. But Alex Wood pitched game 4 of this game. He lost, but he's been a really big contributor to what they were trying to do. In 16, they went and got Rich Hill and Josh Reddick at the deadline because they needed those guys to win the division, and that was what they were aiming. And then you can see it this year when they were clearly running away with the division. They got Yu Darvish in order to win the World Series. Darvish pitched great in Game 3, and it seems like you can kind of see that while, I get it too, like when teams are trying to thread the needle between winning and also hoarding talent, you sort of want to say, like, well, pick a side, like, what are you trying to do here? But they showed that, there is a possibility to kind of get in between those two things and have success with it.
Yeah, and what really kind of helped, I think,
Checking
either
my phone, it may be our bosses.
perhaps they were right.
I have to write tomorrow. Don't worry, you have some time off.
Yes. Maybe they got lucky, or maybe they read it correctly. But either way, the fact that Corey Seager was the player that he was supposed to become, that the fact that Cody Bellinger was even better than he was supposed to become, really has allowed them to kind of do that. And did they know that this was going to happen? I'm not so sure exactly, but you know what? At the end of the day, they talk about process, but it's really about results.
Right.
They got the result here, and you have to give them credit.
Yeah, and I'm sure you did. I'm sure you felt great, giving all those guys credit.
I did.
Yeah, that's good.
That was very nice.
Did you mention Farhan's laptop in your column?
I did. Oh my God! I did not get the laptop in.
Look.
Well, I just said
in a season of disappointments, the greatest disappointment here.
Speaking of not the opposite of disappointment, though, I think everybody is happy. Everybody around baseball, I think, is happy for Clayton Kershaw.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of the theme of what I wrote about tonight because for 4 years preceding this, they basically were asking Kershaw to lift them up. They were basically saying we will go as far as Kershaw can take us. And it's a credit to the front office, to to other players, to Dave Roberts, who kind of outfoxed Joe Madden, as I think most reasonable observers expected to happen. It's a credit to those guys that they didn't need Clayton Kershaw to be Superman. He threw 6 innings of 1-run baseball. Dave Roberts came over, shook his hand, and said thank you, and hugged him, and that's because they were up 8 runs at that point, because the offense, just crushed Jose Quintana. Kike Hernandez had the game of his life, 3 home runs tonight, and they talk so much about depth, they talked about process, and in the sort of the end result of that is Kershaw gets to reach a stage that he never reached before, and he was as emotional after the game. I mean, honestly, I don't know if I've ever seen a player that emotional. And he's a pretty stoic guy, and he was trying pretty hard to hold it in, but he was choking up a little bit when he was talking about what his teammates meant to him. How Kike came up to him before the game and said, "We have your back," and they told he just appreciated so much that he got to be a part of this group. And I think that's something that his career had been missing. Dave Roberts said this after the game. He's done everything an individual can do. He's got 3 Cy Youngs, he's an MVP, he's an All-Star every year, but he doesn't have a championship. And he was able to play a part in the pursuit tonight rather than have to be the star. And I think he appreciated that.
Yeah, and kind of, you talk about the offense. This is really kind of, we kind of going back to the whole Friedman thing. I mean, Kike Hernandez was the guy that they got in, what at the time was kind of this, is this okay
weird
trading D Gordon
type
of thing. Austin Barnes, the guy who's become their primary catcher, came in that same deal.
Right.
Chris Taylor, who might be the best player in baseball, like after Mike Trout. I mean, I can't, when I think of Chris Taylor, that, earlier this season, right, you try to ask Dave Roberts for a comp.
Yeah.
You can't, Trout is about it, maybe. Like the guy that hits the ball that hard and runs like that.
He hits the ball really hard. He's really
Trout
fast.
Can't play shortstop.
Right. So he's better than Mike Trout.
Than Mike Trout.
I don't know what his WAR is, but it's better than Trout.
But the fact that those guys, you saw, Culberson today. Made that great play at the beginning of the second inning.
Again, they did this without Corey Seager. Yeah. Corey Seager is home in Los Angeles, so it'll be interesting to see. It'd be interesting to see kind of who they face in the World Series, whether it's Houston, whether it's New York. I feel like, hey, the lights are going out here at Wrigley Field. It's all right.
The lights just went out on the Cubs season.
Can you see us? Mark, can you see us in this? Oh, that's great. Shout out to Mark Potts, who's been killing it on video. I guess we can end with this. One of the things we both talked about, and you mentioned this, when you think about your time on the beat, think about getting your way to the ballpark and seeing Clayton Kershaw running alone in the outfield. And I'm just curious, if you think about all those days when you saw that compared to the moment he had tonight, in the clubhouse celebrating.
Yeah, I think that was kind of, and even just kind of when he passed by, I didn't spend any time talking to him like you did, but there was kind of this little moment of, when I said congratulations, I think he understood that it was more than just, hey, the casual kind of congratulations.
Yeah.
I think he knew, obviously, that I'd been there kind of watching it all the years. And I think that's probably what was going through his mind, and that's probably why he was that emotional.
Yeah, and I think, he's a guy who all his teammates say is so conspicuous in his work and that he's the most consistent guy on a daily basis. And so it was a fun night. It was a fun game to cover, cool thing to see. And we'll be back here for the World Series. We'll be back in Los Angeles for the World Series starting next week. We might go to Houston, we might go to New York. Either way, we're probably going to eat too much. You can follow Dylan on Twitter at Dylan O. Hernandez. You can follow me on Twitter at McCullough Times. You can read all the coverage in the pages of the Los Angeles Times at latimes.com/Dodgers. Have a good night.